Hello, 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 all you lovely people. Professor Gray here, wrapping up our week-long discussion of moral relativism. I know, 3 modules, 3 in 1 week. That's a lot. It's probably brutal for you guys going through all this, and I know it's brutal for me putting all these together. But we're getting through it together, and hey, this is the only or the last week, I guess, that we'll be doing 3 modules. Every week from here on out will just be 2 modules. Thank heavens for us all. So there is a light at the end of this tunnel. All right. As usual, you know what I want to do at the beginning of all these videos, at the beginning of every module, I want to review a little bit of the stuff that's pretty important so that we can start talking about it more. All right. Well, first, of course, we're finishing up moral relativism. So what is moral relativism? Well, as we've seen repeatedly, moral relativism is the meta-ethical claim that there are no objective and universal moral values, norms, and principles applying to all people everywhere. Morality depends on or is relative to either cultural or individual acceptance. And so as we've seen, there are 2 different forms of relativism based on this. Again, there's the one based on relative to culture and the one based on relative to individual acceptance that we've talked about now. So let's just review these again in order. So the one about culture is, of course, cultural relativism, and that is the meta-ethical claim that morality is a matter of social and cultural acceptance because morality is solely determined by the customs and laws of one's society and culture. Morality is simply a matter of cultural acceptance. All right, so there's the cultural one for us. And now there is the one about individuals, and that is good old ethical subjectivism. And ethical subjectivism is, well, another meta-ethical claim, this one about that morality is a matter of individual acceptance because morality is solely determined by one's own personal reactions and feelings. Morality is a matter of individual personal acceptance. Okay, we've rehearsed all that stuff. Very good. You'll be dreaming about this with nightmares, I'm sure. But anyway, now I can start tying up some loose ends because I think we can start to collect the problems that we've seen with moral relativism. That'll help us clarify both what moral relativism is, what these theories are, and more importantly, like what's the takeaway or overall problem that these have. And so first, I think we can appreciate their significance and power that they have based on the fact that they are meta-ethical claims. Now, we'll do some more review. What is meta-ethics? Recall that meta-ethics is focused on 2 types of questions, or at least for us in this class, meta-ethics is focusing on 2 questions. There are other ones, but we won't get into. So for us, the 2 types of concerns that meta-ethics is about is, well, first, we're analyzing what claims in ethics mean. And second, we're analyzing how claims in ethics are justified. So those are the 2 aspects of meta-ethics we're focusing on in this class. And so, of course, now we can apply, I've said, moral relativism in its 2 versions that we've talked about. They're all meta-ethical claims. So what do they say about the meaning of moral claims and how justification works? We've seen this already, I think, but I can now start connecting it all together. So first, again, meta-ethics is about what do our claims in ethics mean? So let's look at what moral relativism says about that. So for instance, as I've told you before, Professor Gray thinks slavery is wrong. Hopefully not controversial. And, well, what does this mean according to a moral relativist or according to moral relativism? When Professor Gray says slavery is wrong, what does that mean? Well, we've seen now. Either it means that I'm just saying my culture does not condone slavery. That's the cultural relativism. Or I'm saying that I personally just don't like slavery. Slavery makes me angry, or slavery. And that's ethical subjectivism. But that's it for relativism. Relativism says that all your claims mean is either something about your society or something about your personal feelings. But that is it. There is no deeper truth or reason going on there. It's just about cultural or social acceptance, or it's about your personal feelings on the matter. But that is it. There's nothing else. And again, this is just because, remember, moral relativism says there are no objective, universal moral truths in ethics. It's all just relative, again, to either society and my feelings, or that's it. so again, society, cultural relativism, or my personal feelings, ethical subjectivism. And that's all claims in ethics can possibly mean. So that's the first part of metaethics. What do our claims in ethics mean? Now we see how the moral relativist proceeds. It's all relative to something. That's the only meaning we get. And the second part now is, well, how do we justify these claims in ethics? So again, Professor Gray thinks slavery is wrong. And so how could such a statement be justified according to moral relativism? What would I have to do to justify my claim that slavery is wrong? And again, I can only do that by appealing, if I'm a cultural relativist, only by appealing to my culture and society. I'd have to show that my culture and society agree, and therefore slavery is wrong. And I've justified my point. Or I would have to show, if I'm a subjectivist, I would have to show that, well, I really do hate it. I have a feeling about it. These are my true beliefs, and my true feelings about slavery are ones of anger and disgust at the practice. But again, there is nothing more to be done, because that is all there is to moral relativism. It is relative to either my society or my personal feelings. And that's how I justify it. I look to society and confirm that, yep, slavery is wrong, or I look to my heart and, yeah, I don't like slavery. In either case, that's all there is to it. And so I can only say what is socially permitted, or I can only say what feels right. That's it for reason. Those are the only reasons a relativist would allow, depending on which kind of relativist they are, whether a cultural kind or a subjectivist kind. Again, they just say the only reasons that matter in justification are either my personal feelings for subjectivism or what my society agrees upon if I'm a cultural relativist. And these are huge restrictions on how moral reasoning can work, because now the reasons are either about my society or about my personal feelings, and that's it. And indeed, these restrictions may very well reduce moral reasoning to nothing, or at least of nothing of interest, because moral reasoning is no longer about morality, and it no longer involves much reasoning because it's been limited. Instead, we're just talking about cultural norms or our feelings. There's really no reasoning about ethics and morality. Again, it's all about talking about culture or feelings. See a therapist. That's it. But there's no reasoning, and we're not reasoning about ethics and morality anymore. The focus has changed to society or feelings. So again, we're not left with much that's moral or that is reasoning. It's just culture, feelings, and that's it. And if anything, we can say that cultural relativism just ends the conversation, ends the discussion about what's right, what's wrong, because after all, if you feel a certain way about slavery, how can I argue with how you feel? If you feel that way, you feel that way. End of conversation. Or similarly, how can I argue about what society permits? At least not very deeply, because if society permits it, then society permits it. End of conversation. So again, these close off the conversation, because if it's about your feelings, you feel that way or you don't, we're done. And if it's about society, well, society permits it or doesn't, end of conversation in both cases. Now, if that isn't enough to make you at least concerned, that you just say, this is how, we end the conversation by it. That's how I feel. You have your opinion. But I'll raise just one more problem with moral relativism. And I think this is one that's pretty common amongst other philosophers. So I think it's worth mentioning, that really kind of shows what problems we're seeing here. Because moral relativism cannot make sense of disagreements we may have about ethics. And it certainly doesn't help us resolve the disagreements we may have about ethics. So suppose I'm Professor Gray, I think slavery is wrong. And let's suppose you think slavery is okay, and indeed you own slaves. I hope you don't, but that's for the sake of this little example. I'm against slavery. I want it abolished. You are pro-slavery, and you even own slaves. You like it so much. Now, Rosie the relativist comes along and sees us here talking about it, and she just says, well, you're both right. Professor Gray, slavery is wrong for you, but for your friend here, slavery is okay. Yay. What? How does that help us resolve our conflict that we're both right? Not at all. Because yes, our feelings or our cultures are different, but now what? How do we resolve it? If we're all right, well, Rosie the relativist has completely missed the point. Ethics is practical. I've said this a million times. Ethics is about action. Ethics is about strategy. I can't say it enough. Scream it from the rooftops. Ethics is about doing something. And when it comes to our disagreement about slavery, I want to free your slaves and you want to keep them. This is about action. How we can't both be right because we're going to react to each other about this. And so this suggests that relativism seems completely ill-equipped to help us deal with how to resolve disagreements, either between cultures or between individuals who feel differently. And indeed, if anything, the best we might get is that, well, we'll have to resolve it through perhaps violent conflict, either between different individuals who feel differently or different cultures and societies who feel differently. Indeed, there's a whole literature on clash of civilizations, Google it, that is basically this kind of relativistic view that there's different cultures that disagree, and the only way they could possibly be resolved is through force, through trying to enforce or impose our wills on each other, because we're both right. So how are we going to live together? Well, one party has to dominate and control the other because we're about action, about what are we going to do, given that I'm against slavery and you're for it. And this seems pretty dismal and sad, to say the least, that if this is the best we can hope for to resolve disagreements is through some kind of force or coercion. That seems pretty sad. And so that's, I think, a pretty major concern with moral relativism. It just cannot handle conflicts between people. And that's pretty depressing. So why don't we pause, take a quick break, stretch your legs out, massage your brain. Oh, massage the brain. Oh, it feels good. When we come back, I will propose an alternative approach to ethics that allows us to reopen the conversation about right and wrong without closing it to culture or feelings. And I think this gives us the hope of resolving conflicts that don't have to go to violence or force. But we'll get to that in a moment. So why don't you go stretch your legs, and I'll see you right back here in a sec.